Welcome back, everyone. Our next guest tonight really does interviews, but he's decided to speak out because he fears for the safety of Australians. His name is Walter Mikac. In 1996, his wife Nanette Mikac and daughters, 6-year-old Alana and 3-year-old Madeline, were among 35 people killed during what became known as the Port Arthur Massacre. It prompted Prime Minister John Howard to enact the largest gun reforms this country has ever seen, eliminating more than 600,000 weapons from our streets. Just last week, presidential candidate Hillary Clinton said this about our buyback scheme. Take a look.
In the Australian example, as I recall, that was a buyback program. The Australian government, as part of trying to clamp down on the availability of automatic weapons, offered a good price for buying hundreds of thousands of guns. Certainly the Australian example is worth looking at.
And Walter Mikac joins us now. Walter, good evening to you.
Thanks, Carl.
When you saw Hillary say that, how did you feel?
Well, I have to say, my chest puffed up and I thought, this is something we can be really proud of, especially, that as a legacy to Nanette and Alana and Madeline and, the other 32 victims and the people that were injured, and all the trauma that caused for a whole nation and beyond, that we should be, incredibly proud. And as Australia, as a nation, that we actually have stood up, taken that emotion of the time and actually made change happen, which is the envy of other countries around the world. You
had what none of us could even imagine, what it was like going through what you went through. You had a lot of cameras on you, a lot of focus on you. You don't do many interviews these days. Why have you decided to come out now?
Well, I think there has been a number of issues. I did an interview recently where John Howard was interviewed by Andrew Denton, and so a lot of these issues of the watering down that's happened to our gun laws is really quite disturbing. I mean, they've sort of happened by stealth, and because I think, we've probably become a bit complacent because, things have been going quite well here. We've had no mass shootings in that time since Port Arthur. Our rate of murder by firearms has decreased by over 50%. And, it's one of those things when it's not affecting people, they become a bit complacent.
It was arguably John Howard's finest moment. Do you fear that something like this is going to happen again?
Well, I think when you've got the proposed, there's the Adler lever action shotgun which is being proposed to be allowed into Australia. This is a dangerous thing because you've got a weapon that fires 8 shots in 8 seconds. If they modify it and they're talking about having a cartridge with 5, it shoots 5 shots in 5 seconds. So if you put that in a scenario of Martin Place, if you put that in a scenario of what happened in Parramatta recently, the tragedy is going to be a lot bigger. And, if people are able to accumulate a number of these guns, then that's multiplied.
You're not saying get rid of all guns?
No, I mean, I'm certainly not anti-gun. I mean, I think people are entitled to have a weapon if they want. They're entitled to have weapons that comply with the law. However, we're not at war. We're not in a country where you need semi-automatic firearms. We're not in a country where you need to be able to fire 8 shots at a time to protect yourself. And I think we want to be individual in that we can live as a peaceful nation, not as a nation where everyone's in fear of someone else having a firearm.
Your girls, I mentioned before, Alana was 6, Madeline was 3. Obviously now, Alana would be 25, Madeline 22.
Yep. How
do you reflect on them?
Well, obviously you wonder at the loss of potential. You wonder at what they'd be doing now. I have friends who've got children of similar ages and, they're driving around, they've got boyfriends, girlfriends, finished university, all those sort of things that you would look forward to, and you have the thought of the day that they would have got married, all those, great moments that you wished you could share, but unfortunately that potential is lost. But, I just want, through my actions, to try and keep their spirit alive, which is... having the foundation named after them is a big part of that.
Where do you think they'd be? What do you think they'd be doing now? Do you allow yourself to think that?
Sometimes. I know Alana was a very theatrical sort of girl. She was always singing. In fact, they were both like that. So, I dare say that would have been her calling. Maddie was a lot quieter and, at 3 it's a bit hard to sort of know where they're heading. But, you often have that reflection.
And this is a difficult question, but... what are your great memories of those 2 girls?
Oh, I think it's the very basic things that you do on a day-to-day basis that, which often you take for granted. Is sitting with them, sitting on your lap, watching a video. Remember having the daily bath with them. Going to the park, playing with the dogs. All those sort of things. And when it's taken away, it's difficult. And you really they're the sort of things that you yearn for, and you see that happening around you, and you feel sad that you can't partake in that.
And you want a message, you want to send a message, a clear message too, don't you, to the government?
I do. I want to say to, well, my challenge is to Bob Catter and his son-in-law, who's the biggest importer of firearms in Australia. If their family they'd lost some of their members of their family as a result of a gun, of a massacre, would they be wanting to import those sort of guns into Australia? Do we want to bring in, weapons that fire 5 shots in 5 seconds? Or do we want to actually work the other way to making there less? We've already done an incredible job by passing those initial firearm reforms. We don't want to water them down. And I just urge Australians to not become complacent. To if the opportunity comes to make a stand, to make that stand.
In order to move forward, sometimes we do need to reflect, and so we're going to get Bob Catter's views on that in just a second, and our panel. But you wrote me a letter, and I've received it here, and I'm going to read a bit out of it if you don't mind.
Sure.
Next year will mark the 20th anniversary of the Port Arthur tragedy, and I think a fitting remembrance to the victims would be a collection of love letters from Australians from all walks of life. I think of my children, you say, every day, and have constructed poems and words of gratitude for their short lives in my mind over and over. When you lose someone that you love, the feeling of despair never goes away. The wound may heal over time, but the scar is with you for life. I find it difficult to even read those words, given I have a family of my own as well. But you have a letter to start things off as well. Tell everyone who wrote that.
Well, this is written by Alana as a 5-year-old, and I think, for me, this is what often sustains me. It's often, when you think of loss, you think, well, at least I have had, and this is her love letter that she wrote as a 5-year-old, and she writes, I love my dad. My dad owns the chemist, and he loves it when I come to his shop with some paintings. And Dad loves my mum. I love you, Mum and Dad, and I know you love me.
God, it's beautiful, man. To have that, does it feel like you have something to take forward when you look back?
Yeah, well, I just dug this up actually last weekend, and I have to say it did bring me to tears, and it was, it was moving, and at the same time, it's also inspiring to make more change happen, to not let the gun laws get watered down, to make sure that the Alana and Madeline Foundation continues to help children who have suffered from violence and loss.
It's so good to see you, and thank you for coming out. I appreciate
My pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mikac, everyone.